feel like you were just really focused on me. Okay.
Okay. So I'll be doing my speech about how we should be using DNA from like 23andMe and Ancestry to DNA.com to also help us solve cold cases in forensics, because we have so many John Does and Jane Does and like people who are unidentified, and we have so many just cold cases from the last like 50 years cases have just turned cold. So people who actually use Ancestry.com and 23andMe, I'm like, they get their DNA out technically to the public, and then it should be used kind of with the government to help solve those cases, either putting a face to the people who no longer have them, or to actually solve the case and actually have justice. So most families, they at least have one person that will, you know, kind of be like an aunt or a grandma who can kind of give your guys' family tree. But sometimes it's not very accurate, you know, sometimes there's a bad blood cousin, so people kind of don't mention them. And so that is why in 2010, Ancestry, DNA, and 23andMe became big, because for a lot of times people, they don't know who they are. And so then they don't know who their complete family tree is. So then of course they put their DNA, which is usually they just spin a tube and send it on its way. And then within a month you go online and they give you your records. And so they can give you people who are like all the way up to like your fifth cousins, and just figuring out just kind of who your family tree is. And it's wonderful. And people nowadays use it to give as presents. And even people who are trying to have kids, sometimes they use their partner's DNA and theirs, and they try to combine it to see the statistics of seeing what your kid's gonna look like, even like what color hair, their health history, anything. So I'm like, it's still powerful, it's still recommended today, but I want us to start using it also still for the government. In the 2000, like maybe 15, a couple years after Ancestry and DNA started doing that, the government, what they use to collect DNA is usually from criminals or people that they have to get a warrant for. And what it is, it's like Paragon. And so with Paragon, it's little. I'm like, maybe it only has like up to like 10,000 DNA samples in there. And so it doesn't really do the job it's needed. And yet millions of people use Ancestry.com, 23andMe. And so at a point, the government was like, you know, we're not solving any of these crimes, we're not getting anywhere that we need to be. So they were kind of like tapped on 23andMe's and Ancestry.com's door and was like, hey, you guys have all these samples. People are literally paying you to take their samples. Do you mind if we kind of go in there and use it as well? Just for a little bit. And of course, they didn't have any problems with that until they started actually solving crimes. And people were kind of getting a little upset when they're like, hey, how come my cousin is in jail for killing 2 people? Like, that's from me giving my DNA. Like, you know, that could be a little problematic, especially if you're in a family reunion kind of having issues. But, so because of that, people then kind of started getting upset with 23andMe, because nobody wants the government in their business. I completely understand that. I'm like, generally if the government's involved, things are not good. But with this one certain case, it is needed, just because we have so many cold cases, so many people who don't even have their identities even anymore. So I'm just gonna say it's needed, it's very much wanted. So now, because Ancestry.com and 23andMe got in trouble for having the government be a part of theirs and giving out their samples, that now when people use it, they actually have, there's a bottom when you click on when you log in where it says, can you share my results? And you have to kind of do like, yes, share it with Paragon, or no, keep it, you know, private. And I'm telling you to please kind of share it, so that way, I'm like, again, it is used for public, because nobody can really steal your identity through there. They're just there to use it just in case, you know, you have a lost cousin that went missing in the 70s and nobody ever figured out what happened. And then they find out that person died, and then at least you guys can get their body back and have closure. But, but with the New Yorker, and with Times Magazine, they both really enhanced on a certain person named Cece Moore, who, when she was younger, she was actually a model and an actress, but when she was in her 40s, she was trying to give her cousin a wedding gift of showing her their family tree for her future partner and for her. And then, of course, she got addicted, because I guess a lot of people do when they want to learn about their ancestry. And so after that, she actually got into genealogical, I'm not saying that right, like genetic genealogy. There we go. And she actually went and got her degree in that in her 40s. So that after that, she actually became almost like a detective, like not a secret detective. One of those detectives that people can get. And she's been solving crimes such as like people getting mixed in the hospitals when they were born, to people being abducted and then living a life not with their actual family, to people who have just been adopted and it's all like it was a closed adoption and we want to figure out who I am. And of course, with her doing that, then of course she was getting emails and letters about people being like, hey, I have a family member that died, we just want to know what happened. And because of that, she became amazing. She became like a superhero, honestly, in like the genetics space, because people started really looking up to her, because she would actually solve the cases all within like a couple days. And she actually has like a famous case that she solved in 2 hours, which took detectives 30 years to solve, where it was literally just like a 1987 case where there was a homicide in a field, and they were able to figure out who the victim was, but they couldn't figure out anything after that. And within 30 years of going on like America's Most Wanted and like U.S. Mysteries, everything just led to dead ends, and that meant a lot of taxpayers' money. So then in 2018, when they sent her the file, like 2 hours later, she sent them the actual paperwork of, hey, this is the sample that we found. This is your guy. Go get him. So something that took 30 years, she was able to solve in 2 hours. And if we had more people like her and people were more interested in genealogy and the genetics, that we would be able to solve crimes if people were just more open about it. But you can easily just get DNA tests. But with the New Yorker and New York Times Magazine, they really emphasize how important she is, and how right now she's only 1 in a million, but we can soon get more people like her if people were just more open. But it all starts with just people like us, where if you just want to go and do your ancestry, which you're not forced to, but if you do choose to do it, all you have to do is just let it be sent also to the government just to help solve cases. It doesn't have to be, your DNA that solves the crime. It could sadly be like a cousin, a great aunt, something where sadly if they did a crime, or if sadly any of them went missing and is gone, it could be linked back to them, which could be a good thing. But yeah, I'm just gonna tell you, please, if you choose to do any of that stuff, to let the government honestly help in this one stance. The government's bad in a lot of ways, but not in this stance when it involves solving crimes. Ta-da!